Welcome to another edition of Big Nick Energy Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Yolk. We have a really special guest today, DJ Ace, one of the best basketball minds of film study on doing Knicks content and content in general. I actually like following him a lot for, like he did Cade Cunningham last night for a little bit. I like watching his stuff for other teams and players more than the Knicks, honestly. DJ, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, Joe. How are you? Can't complain. Appreciate the invite.
No problem, man. I'm doing fantastic, too. Thank you for asking back. Real quick, merchandise, and it is Christmas and holiday season, so I just got to let everyone know. We're doing a little sale for BigNickEnergy.com merchandise. We're offering free shipping until December 11th. The code for that is XMAS23, so Xmas23. December 11th is also the last day you can place your orders to guarantee arrival before Christmas. So again, Xmas23, get your free shipping, and go to BigNickEnergy.com to get all your coolest shirts. There's so many cool things on there. We just made Randall into like a Hulk-looking sea monster thing. There's the Block Ness monster for Mitch, obviously. There's Star J. There's 25 different Emmanuel Quickley shirts. Get your stuff while you can. DJ, I want to get into, so I know I sent you the questions prior to actually doing this. I wanted to start off first and foremost with the in-season tournament and what you've thought of it early on in the season, because I do feel like it's actually allowed fans to get into it earlier in the year than they usually do, especially if you're more of a casual fan. And it does appear to the naked eye that the players are trying harder and taking this very, very seriously. So now that the group stage is over, what is your initial thoughts on the IST?
Yeah, I was a skeptic kind of coming in, which I think was a fair sort of position to take going into it, because it was a brand new idea, and it did feel like it was a made for TV sort of experiment by the NBA. But I feel like because the crowds have been so into it, the players, yes, the money is a big deal. And Fred Katz today actually said that he just in the locker room, he's overhearing players talking about that potential prize money. So that is a factor. But just the fact that the crowds are into these games, the players, I'm sure, are feeding off that. So for that alone, I mean, games in November, we typically don't get this sort of intensity like that. The Kings-Warriors game a few nights ago, I mean, that was a playoff game, basically. And that was just an example of sort of what the NBA was going for. So I think it's been a rousing success, and there are some tweaks that we can maybe talk about, but as this moves on to the quarterfinals and eventually Vegas, I think that this is played out as well as the league could have hoped for. So at this point, I'm sort of bought in, and I can't wait to see how the Knicks play out against Milwaukee and see where they go from there.
Mentioning the Warriors-Kings game from a couple nights ago is actually a great segue for this, because I do feel like in the future, one of the best things they could potentially do is making sure the last game is – it would be cool if they were all at the same exact time, so you'd know what the other team's doing, right? Because it did seem like the Knicks and the other teams had an advantage. The Knicks, Celtics both made it. The Magic didn't make it because they played the night before or the Friday before. It kind of hurts a little bit. But I do think one change they can definitely make is having you always go up against like a historical rival. Like the Kings Warriors have been disliking each other for 2-3 years now because of the playoffs and the Kings, like their proximity, obviously, big brother, little brother thing. What is one thing you think they should definitely try to change in the future iterations of this?
So I think, taking this from like a Knicks perspective, I know Tibbs was asked about the fact that the Knicks are going to play the Bucks 5 times, and there's a competitive disadvantage as you move on through this thing, because this has been, you look at the way the quarterfinals are sort of set up, you only really have one team that you would consider to be like a Cinderella or a team that you wouldn't expect to necessarily be there in the Pacers, but everyone else, these are legitimate, really good, if not championship contending teams. So this is going to put you at a disadvantage if your ultimate goal, which it should be, is to improve your playoff positioning for the actual playoffs and then ultimately win a round or two. So I think one of the ways, and I forget who I heard say, it's not my original idea, but one of the ideas was if you go on to the finals and you end up winning it or losing it, if you win the game, because it counts towards your, you'll let that count towards your regular season in the win column. But if you lose the final game, that shouldn't count in the loss column, because right now it's you don't get the win, you don't get the loss. But if the team wins the whole thing, let that count as a regular season win. I think that would be a nice way to incentivize, a coach that's maybe going to prioritize the regular season and the NBA playoffs. But, that's one thing. And then on a small little aesthetic detail, the courts, I feel like have been a good thing because it differentiates these games. that one little strip across the middle of the floor, remove that, and I think you have a really cool sort of concept there with the different courts, because that was a really great idea, but I think the execution was a little off, but continue to sort of like figure that part out. But just that one strip across the court, just to me, like threw off the aesthetics of it. But beyond that, these are two minor tweaks. Overall, has been a really good thing. But I think trying to figure out the disadvantage of playing good teams extra, because, if you're looking at it from the Knicks perspective, they're probably better off winning the Hornets game by like 3 or 4 and not making the tournament if you're basing it on just maximizing regular season wins. So that's something they're gonna have to figure out. But it's early, obviously the first time doing this, so they're gonna have to tweak it. That's one I think they should probably look at.
I agree with almost every single thing you said. One thing I do want to push back on, some of the courts, the colors just don't look aesthetically pleasing on TV or for a basketball game. Yeah. And obviously we're not the ones playing out there. If I'm playing on like a bright red court like they had for the Hawks or the Rockets or whatever, like I feel like that's affecting my basketball game in general, man. I feel like my eye level might be differentiated. Like some of them are just too neon and too bright in my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I love the idea of differentiating the court, just so if you're a fan just tuning in, it's a in-season tournament game. But like I said, the execution probably lacking in in terms of the bright orange or bright red. Yeah, I agree with you. I think those could be toned down a little bit.
That's fair. Okay. That's good enough for the in-season tournament. I want to get into one question about you doing film and the idea of like film versus the common guy versus regular fan before we get into all the Knicks stuff. So what is an example of something within the game of whether it's regular basketball or the NBA as a whole that you feel like fans don't have a grasp on, that you know and learned through film study that you wish they understood more about the NBA?
Sure. I think, the first thing I would say is, and I think it's not like a prevalent thought, but there's like an idea that, the players themselves, how much work are they putting in? How much are they really putting into their craft? And I will say, like, I've watched the NBA pretty religiously since like the mid 90s. And I feel like now players are more serious about their job than ever before. So I feel like when you really hone in on like film stuff, you can see like where players are improving year after year, just adding certain things to their bag. And an easy example right now for the Knicks is like Jalen Brunson's, and this has been like talked about a lot, but his 3-point distance on his shots has become like a real weapon where, before the Knicks got him, in Dallas, he would be right up against that 3-point line. Now, as started last year, and then it's just continuing this year, where he's sort of extending out where he could set up on those catch and shoot opportunities, which is just enhancing the overall spacing. And then you have RJ Barrett and quickly these guys adding certain things to their game year after year. And I feel like that is something, if you're not really watching it, you can miss sort of the subtleties in that regard. And then, just like on a bigger picture thing, I know that, this is a Knicks podcast, so kind of honing in on that, but it feels like many people think the Knicks don't run this like, high level offense, where I would agree they're not like the Nuggets or the Warriors in terms of like some of the motion stuff or delay actions that those teams run. But the Knicks do have their fair share of like interesting offensive looks. They're really prevalent in horns action. They love the pistol action with RJ Barrett. They love the Spain pick and roll. They'll run that 2 or 3 times. So if you really look at these, what the Knicks are doing, it's not just ISO game with Brunson and Randall. There are some more intricacies they do. It's not the most exciting offense, but if you really watch, you can see like where players are getting their shots and just figure it out. Like in terms of like, this is not just an ISO. There's maybe something going on the weak side that you wouldn't necessarily see if you're just looking at where the ball is. So, the Knicks, for example, as an example, they do run interesting stuff that you just might have to like look for it. But that's something that where any fan can go back and like watch the game and rewatch and you just say, all right, how did Quentin Grimes get so wide open on this play? Well, it's because the attraction that Randall has, his gravity and the ability to swing that ball to the weak side. So, those are just things that maybe doesn't pop when you're watching the game live, but on rewatches, they could really show up where any fan can sort of just get in there and figure out like certain things, ask the question, and then use the film to sort of answer that.
That's great insight. I really appreciate you answering that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to say a couple things. One, you look great for your age. I would not have thought you started watching basketball in the mid-90s. So I hope I have your skin in the next 10 years. That's for sure. And 2, every single person takes their job more seriously except for Jordan Poole.
That's fair. I mean, look, I can't push back on that. It's been a rough Washington start for him, but yes, I would say that's a fair pushback. Generally speaking, I think players take their job very seriously. Jordan Poole's like in his own category of like just chaos and mayhem, but fun to watch. If it, maybe not all for all the good reasons.
When he has it going, yeah,
yeah, right.
He went to the
next, yeah.
Yeah, he went to the James Harden school of I don't care right now.
Yeah.
You mentioned RJ Barrett before, so I know I wrote RJ Barrett as one of the last parts of the email, but I'll skip to him first and then go to the Mitch after that. So RJ Barrett in the 7 games pre-migraine this year, 22.6 points per game, 3.4 rebounds, 3.1 assists, really, really good shooting splits, especially considering his history. 48.7, 50% from 3, which obviously no one thought would hold the whole year, but still for 7 games, 50% is amazing. 85% from the line. The 5 games post-migraine, 14.4 points per game, so an 8-point drop-off, 4 rebounds, 1.6 assists, so those were cut in half. 33% from the field, less than 29% from 3, but his free throw shooting is still holding up. It's actually at 88% now. So RJ started off scorched shooting earth from the basketball, which he never really has before for a long period of time. Past few games, he's reverted back to being mediocre at efficiency, and his efficiency is even mediocre and not bad because of how good his free throw shooting's been. It's been able to keep his EFG percentage up. But his shooting splits for the year are still 43-43, which is really good, and 86. What noticeable changes have you seen from RJ's mechanics, but from last year to FIBA to this year that maybe he and Drew Hanlon have worked on so far?
Yeah, he's definitely so there's typically 2 schools of thought when shooting. There's like your typical one motion shot, which is your Steph Curry's or Dame Lillard, and then you have your 2 motion guys. That's like a LeBron James, Luka Doncic, Quentin Grimes. He's a 2 motion shooter where you have 2 parts to your shot. You have the it's not as clean up and down as you might have with like a Steph Curry. Now, I'm not saying there's one that's better. I think you can sort of, a guy like Kevin Durant, who's more of like kind of has both of those 1 motion, 2 motion things going on there. But I think for a guy like RJ, it was important to take what was more of a 2 motion shot, make it more 1 motion. So you're just kind of going from the dip of going from your dip all the way up to your shot form in one clean motion. That takes away variability. And for RJ, where I think he needs his feet set, generally speaking, he needs to have things in order. He needs to have his alignment correct. When you take a variable of like that 2 motion form out of the equation and you're more 1 motion, I think that added to the fact that he can, maybe take some of those things that can go wrong, move them aside, and just worry about like getting his alignment right. So the fact that he's gone to more of a 1 motion shooting form, I think has helped him a lot. And it's really showing up in the free throw percentage where it's just it's a cleaner look. He doesn't have as much wasted motion, wasted movement. And, in terms of like everything else finishing at the basket, those things are still a concern and things he's going to have to work on. But in terms of his 3-point shooting overall and his free throw shooting, being more of a 1 motion shooter to me has been a big help. And we'll see how that plays out. This has been, I think, 3 or 4 times since his high school days that he's changed his shooting form. And I feel like he's kind of...
That's a lot.
It's a lot, which, one of them was like the Knicks messed his shot up his rookie year. That wasn't something he necessarily wanted to do, but the Knicks changed his shot right away, and I think he's still trying to get back to where he used to be. But the fact that he is now honed in on something that I think is working, I just hope he sticks with it and sees and kind of see after a full season where the results are. But I think the results overall you'd have to say are positive. And he's still new in this. He's still trying to figure things out. But you'll see him make a couple of shots now where, yeah, his feet might not be set, but his upper body from the waist up still looks good. And that's more of like taking all those like extra movements out of his shooting form and just being more consistent with how he's releasing the ball. So that's been a positive for him. And I feel like, I always had confidence that he was going to shoot it pretty well because of how hard he works. I didn't think he'd be this strong as a free throw shooter, so I do worry there might be some regression in that category. But if he's an 80% free throw shooter and 36, 37 from 3 on decent volume, that's a really good base to build off of. And then just to get that passing and those quick decisions and the finishing at the rim, you have a player that with his defense now being really strong at this point, you have a real solid case to be a good 2-way wing, borderline like third best player on a championship team, which is where I think his ceiling is, and I think he's progressing into that area.
Last year, he shot 43 from the field. I'm trying to look at it right now. 31 from three, which is one of his lowest of his career, obviously. And then 74 from the free throw line. I was just looking for like mediocre, like uprising, from 43 to 46, from 31 to 35, and then from 71 to 78 would be still monumental for him being a more efficient player. What's really helped him out so far this year that he started working on or getting back to where he could have been in the playoffs has been his defense. He seems like he's moving his feet better. He seems like he's actually rotating better on guys. And that wasn't something we saw a lot last year. It seems like he progressed a little bit, honestly. So can you talk about why RJ was good at defense? It seemed like 2 years ago, what happened last year and how he's gotten back to where he should be?
So the only thing I can say about last year, because to me it's a major conundrum and I don't necessarily have a great answer, but it seems like this year he is a little bit more fleet of foot, and I think he's in better shape. So I think there was that factor, but I had no answer for why he was so bad on defense last year, because to your point, like a couple of years ago, he was, I would say, a positive defensive player, and he's back to that level now. And I would say in the playoffs last year, he was good. And I feel like he's in better shape this year. I feel like, in terms of his athleticism, he's never going to be an amazing athlete, but if you factor in his size and strength, he's, and I think I've tweeted this a couple of times, but he's really good at playing angles. He sort of knows where to put his body, and because he is such a big bodied player for his position in terms of his shoulder length and his width, he's able to not get burned on a lot of plays. You'll see him in ISO where he's not getting blocks, he's not getting strips, he's not creating events on the defensive end, but he's just in the way. And rarely do you see guys just toast him in those areas. His issue has always been the off-ball stuff where he's not paying attention, he's getting back cut, or he's not getting over a screen well enough. Those things are still an issue. He really can get stuck on screens. It's something I think teams really are still exploiting. But if you put him in a situation where he's just got to guard his man, I think he's very good. And overall, the Knicks defense has been very strong this year. I think part of that is they don't have as many weak links. Brunson's been better defensively. RJ's been better. You have the Randall thing to sort of contend with, but even him, 6'9", 250, you can't post him up. He's not going to be such a disaster defensively to where he's going to, corrupt your entire defense. So RJ's improvement, Brunson, and then obviously Mitch being, and I think we'll get to him later, Mitch being potential
next guy we're talking about,
defensive player of the year conversation. This is why the defense is as strong this year as it's been.
So that actually is perfect, because you tweeted yesterday in response to a Knicks Film School thread that the Knicks have not had a center that can consistently perform at this level defensively since Ewing. Chandler was great, but I think Mitch clears.
Yeah.
So obviously Tyson Chandler won Defensive Player of the Year while he was on the Knicks. He helped the Mavericks win a title, all that stuff. Can you explain what Mitch has done? Because it seems like this has been over the past 18 months.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
More or less, that the last two seasons that's made him get to this point that he's at now, that he'd even be in the conversation of Chandler, nonetheless better.
Yeah. It's a good point, because I feel like, and this is going to tie into the comparison with Chandler, who did win the Defensive Player of the Year in 11-12, the years 2011, 2012. The Knicks' first year with him, he sort of changed their defense. There was he had the narrative push. I mean, he was a great defensive player, so I'm not taking anything away from him, but I will say, as Mitch has progressed into this really strong drop defensive center that can play that cat and mouse game in the pick and roll, which has been a progression. And I feel like it's taken him a little bit of time, because it is such a challenging position now to play defensively, because you just have so many, when Chandler was playing, it was like you're going to contend with a pull-up shooter, or you're going to get a guy going all the way to the basket. Now you have so many players that come in with a dominant float game, and then you have the lob threat. So you have these guys like Trae Young that can disguise when he's going to shoot, when he's going to throw the lob. It just makes it very hard to know as you're guarding basically two defenders. And that's what Mitch does on almost every pick and roll. You have, let's say, Grimes chasing over the top. He does a great job of staying close. And I feel like they have a really good pairing, but there's going to be separation there because of the screen. So you have Mitch defending the point guard or the guard coming downhill, and then he's got to worry about behind him the roll man. Those are things that Chandler had to contend with on occasion, but not on 30 times a game, which is what Mitch has to do right now. And I feel like that part, and then the idea that Mitch has become really adept at getting deflections this year, and I feel like that alone has really leveled his game up. I think he's at about a steal and a half a game right now with a block and a half. Those two things, like he's creating events on the defensive end. His hands are always up. That's been a big change this year. I feel like he's he's realized how long he is and how much damage he can do by just having his arms out wide. And he's got quick hands. He can really get in there and deflect balls and take away passing lanes. So I feel like those two things, are going to put him maybe not in the defensive player of the year category yet, because I think Gobert is still, he's a Hall of Fame defensive center. Yeah. He's playing that way right now. And Adebayo, the way he could switch on to any player on the court, and his defensive ability is just well thought of. And he's just been amazing this year on that end. So I don't think Mitch is going to be at that level. But in terms of defensive player of the year votes, he's going to be on that list, whether it's top 10 or top 8. Maybe he gets into close to the top 5, but he's been that level a center. And to me, you just look at the way Tibbs will talk about him. He seems to be very cognizant of the fact that this defense works in part because Mitch has been so great on his end. And I feel like he's just everything. And he's in his mid-20s. I feel like he's got the balance of strength and athleticism still in the tank. He's playing great. And I've obviously we've all watched him as he came in as a rookie and where he is now. It's been a great progression. Super proud of him as a person. Didn't have the easiest upbringing. Didn't have he's basically came to the Knicks as like a ball of clay, and the Knicks have really molded him into a fantastic defensive player who doesn't foul anymore, who's accountable, who plays hurt, and doesn't really complain that much, although he'll send a tweet every now and then or post on Instagram. But generally speaking, does his job really well without complaint. So shout out to him, man. It's been great to see where he's come from as a Knick and where he is right now.
Absolutely. It really has. And since you are a little more trained than most of us are, can you deep dive a little bit more into like what makes Bam Adebayo, Rudy Gobert, and Anthony Davis still like a slight notch ahead of where Mitch is currently, and what could Mitch potentially do in order to get to their level?
So you're talking about three guys that on just their defensive ability are like in the 99th percentile in different ways. So, for like Bam, I don't think we've seen a guy be able to switch like he can and just never have, and it's never a mismatch, like ever, whether it's a Jalen Brunson or whether it's a Jason Tatum, like he swallows up opposing playmakers in a way that is just incredible. And I don't know if we're really going to see a guy, play it at that level, or we have, maybe we've seen some players have that ability, but I don't think consistently a team has allowed their center to switch on to opposing, stars the way the Heat do with Bam. So that is a special ability that just it kind of puts him in his own category. And then when it comes to, Gobert, his ability to sort of like play that, I mentioned that cat and mouse game, but Gobert is like 3 inches longer than Mitch, and I feel like that accounts for a lot of those advantages that he has. And he's probably just like, he's so skilled and so aware of like where he needs to be that I don't think as good as Mitch is, I don't think he has the length that Gobert has, and there's just like an awareness that Gobert can sort of play with that is at a different level. And then with Davis, it's more of like when he turns it on, like on a season-long basis, I feel like Mitch can be like at his level, but there are games in the playoffs specifically where Anthony Davis just goes into God mode on defense, and he's like as good a defensive center or big man as you're ever going to see, but he just doesn't have that consistency. So over a season, I think it would be fair to say like value-wise, Mitch can get to Anthony Davis's level, but on the high end, I think Davis is probably at a level where Mitch isn't quite there, but he just doesn't have the ability, whether it's like mentally or health-wise, physically, to sustain that over like a long period of time. But I would say Gobert and Bam are at, they're quite special. And Lopez is like in a different, Brook he's really good, but I feel like there's been some slippage this year. So
yeah,
not quite on those levels, but he's like Mitch is in the next tier, and I feel like that's like an awesome place for him to be.
Is there any way or anything in particular you think he could improve on to get to where that is?
I think the only thing that, and I don't know if this is improvable at this stage. I feel like he's good in terms of like switching and playing on the perimeter, but it's just not his strong suit. And I feel like his like body posture is not great. He's usually hunched over.
Yeah.
You can really do some damage against him when they have him like switched out, or when he's playing against a stretch five, like Porzingis that as we've seen time and time again. Like he just struggles in those areas where he has to close out on shooting bigs, which, he's gotten a little better this year at times, but still a weakness. And, Gobert, Bam, Anthony Davis at his best, they really don't, it might not be like their strong suit, putting Bam aside, but it's something that you can't really exploit to the level that teams can still, get some good stuff when they put Mitch in those actions.
Right. Okay. That's fair then. I wanted to get to Josh Hart next. So obviously the comments came out this past week that Josh Hart wasn't feeling included in the offense the same way he was last year when we traded for him. Fred Katz wrote about how the positional change might be causing him to not handle the ball as much as he did last year. And then for one night, I mean, granted it was against the Hornets, the old squeaky wheel gets the grease proverb holds true, and Hart has 17 points on 10 shots and played the fourth most minutes for New York. On film, just how much differently does Hart's role look like than it was last year, if at all?
It's different, and it's different because when Randall's off the floor, and this is the issue with Obi, or when the Obi proponents would be like, why is he standing in the corner 80% of the time he's out there? Well, it's because that's what Tibbs likes from his four when Randall's on the bench, because it's a lot of RJ in those on those lineups, and they want spacing, and that's just going to be the Tibbs MO when Randall's on the bench. So it's a lot more corner, spotting up for Josh Hart, and it's a lot less time on the ball. That is a true statement. There, I know Tibbs mentioned his usage is actually up this year, which I don't think is true. Maybe it's like I don't think it is. I think if anything, it's like very close on either direction. But I definitely don't think it's higher this year. And you could see the way that in the half court, at least, it's just a different role. He's just spotting up a lot more. He's not touching the ball. His touches are down this year. Like his sheer touching the ball is down. That's a real thing. So if you're a rhythm player, and I think Josh, I give him credit for just being honest about it. If you're a rhythm player, you need those touches to feel like you're involved. That is going to have a detrimental impact on your game. And it's something he's going to have to adjust to, which, the Knicks are paying him a lot of money. I get that. He's going to have to adjust because the role is not going to change. Tibbs is going to have his four spacing unless you're Julius Randle. That's just the way the offense is going to be set up. It's way he's going to design things. He optimizes spacing more than anything. And I feel like that is something that Josh Hart, who has been a good shooter from the corners over his career, that's a role he can flourish in, combining with the fact that he is still a really good transition player. He's going to have to, his defensive rebounding numbers are very good. So when he has those opportunities to get that defensive rebound, push the ball. And this is just one thing that I've just noticed with him. His ability to finish in transition has been notable. All going back to last year, that's a thing that he came in. That's a skill he had. But his ability to push the ball ahead, I feel like has been a little lacking in terms of like he'll get the ball and he'll have shooters on the wings, and he won't necessarily read those corner shooters in time. And I think plays can sort of that where the Knicks have an advantage. They don't really materialize, in terms of the efficiency that you would like to see, based on the fact that he's getting the ball with an advantage. So I like the fact that he can still push the ball on those occasions. So do more of that, but also it's just, he's going to have to adjust to a new role, which is, players just do that, all the time. RJ's done that 3 or 4 times since he's been a Knick. I mean, we know Julius did that during the Kemba Fournier offseason. So there's been times where high-profile Knick players have had to adjust their roles, and it's something that he's going to have to figure out. It's early in the season, so I imagine it's going to be a progression towards putting him in a good spot. But just the last thing I will say with him is like he's going to have to just continue shooting the ball, and he's going to have to just let the ball fly. And I feel like last year he was shooting it with confidence. He was hitting 50% of his threes with the Knicks. That's unsustainable. And I feel like he's at the other end of the spectrum in terms of like shooting in the 20s this year from 3, or upper to maybe low 30s at this point, but he's going to shoot better from that area. But the key is with him is just shoot the ball. Just the record scratch where he catches it, puts it on the floor or pump fakes, and then the play just like turns into, a last second heave at the basket. So shoot the ball when you can, and just adjust to the fact that he's now the backup 4 primarily, and that's what this team needs. And he's part of a lineup, a bench unit that's been really good. So he's the fact that the lineup is working. That's the lineup where all the bench. He's with the bench unit. It's not working when he is the first bench player off the bench. He's playing with the starters. That lineup has been very bad. So Josh Hart with the starters, awful. Josh Hart with the bench players, really good. And the fact that that's been the case, I feel like the Knicks have no reason to switch it up. So he's going to have to adjust to it.
After the Hornets game, he's now 30.8% from 3, and his usage is in fact down. It's went from 12.6 last year to 12.2 this year. And it actually reminded me of the Hornets game you were saying, because his ability to push and then not necessarily find guys in the corners fast enough. A team like the Hornets or the Wizards, or we play the Pistons tonight, when people listen to this, the Pistons game will probably have already happened, but those teams aren't good at stopping the ball anyway. That's why they're as bad as they are. It's when you're playing the Timberwolves, the Celtics, the Bucks, that you actually see like him grabbing the ball, trying to push up the court, and he has a wall in front of him, and then they close out, and that's when you see him faltering a little bit, versus last year it seemed like he made better decisions on the fly.
Yep, and it's I'm sure they've scouted that the fact that he wants to start the left and finish right in transition. That's a play that that's like his bread and butter, transition finish. He's going to have to counter what defenses are doing. That's just the way it is in this league, where defenses, I know offense is at a historic level in terms of like league wide, but defenses are very sophisticated. So they're going to try to take away actions as much as possible. So he's going to have to, I keep saying it, but it's up to him at this point to adjust, because the Knicks are with him playing with the bench players. The lineup is performing really well. So he's going to have to figure out how to make his own personal performance improve on that area.
Agreed entirely. And DJ, thank you again for coming on. I have one more guy I want us to talk about. I actually didn't mention Brunson or Randall at all, because I feel like Brunson and Randall get mentioned in every podcast and across all things all the time. So the last guy I wanted to talk about was Quentin Grimes, who is generally who Hart comes in for during that first initial sub. The Knicks have a starting lineup net rating of 7.0 going to the Pistons game tonight, which obviously includes Quentin Grimes. Fans constantly clamor for IQ to start for a long time, even though the starting 6 minutes of a game very rarely make or break the game. And again, with Grimes, they have a 7.0 net rating. So why does it feel like Grimes has struggled so far to get his offense going? And why do fans keep clamoring for him to be on the bench, even though their starters are doing so well?
Yeah, he's so the first part of like him not performing up to his level last year, it's a real thing, and I feel like it's not necessarily the shooting, it's more the ability to attack closeouts in a very decisive manner, which he did last year. And I feel like there was the idea of like he was going to drive to pass, and I think teams by the end of the year and especially the playoffs really scouted that to the point where they were playing off him and just playing the pass first the shot. So I felt like coming into this year, the big thing for him in terms of development was drive to finish, and that has not materialized. That's a real thing. Like you could see that in the film. You could look at the numbers, the fact that he doesn't get to the free throw line at all. It's a real thing. But the whole idea of him in the starting lineup is it's complicated, but it's not, and it's not complicated in the sense that the Knicks. He's playing with high usage guys. Randall, Brunson, and RJ are going to command a lot of usage. And you're not going to have a guy in the Grimes spot commanding a 20+ usage. There's not enough time in a quarter or or ability in a possession to sort of like maximize another on-ball threat to the point of like Emmanuel Quickly, for example. So I like the fact that Grimes continues to start. One, because as you mentioned, the lineup is like performing at a strong level. And two, they need his point of attack defense. And, Emmanuel Quickly is a fantastic off the ball defender. And this is something I've talked about a lot. But when you put him on the ball, there are some deficiencies there, strength wise and agility wise, that can get exposed. The Knicks, if you watch the way they use him as a defender, he's usually going to be on the corner man, like one of the worst offensive players on the team, because they like the fact that he can roam a little bit. He's such a great communicator. His off-ball defense, just on a whole, is fantastic. And to maximize that, you want to put him on you want to keep him off the best offensive player. And then for Grimes, it's like the opposite. He is really good when he is honed in on one particular player to guard, and not so great off the ball. So in terms of fitting the starting lineup, Grimes is, to me, on this roster, like the best option, despite the fact that his offense has not been where it needs to be. And I think if you swapped him with Quickly, yes, you'd get Quickly's minutes up, but I think you would have some defensive issues that you don't have right now. Like if they played Boston with Emmanuel Quickly and Brunson in the starting lineup, you right away will have an issue guarding that team. That's just a fact. So you need Grimes' defense. Now, the way to get Quickly's minutes up, and this has been said, many times before, it's like get Quickly in there first. It doesn't have to be Josh Hart being the first sub. If you let Quickly be the first sub, you're going to give him an extra, 2 to 3 minutes, and he's going to be playing in the upper 20s instead of like in the mid 20s where he is now. So that's an area to get Quickly's minutes up, which I think is a valid case to be made to get his minutes up. But I don't think it needs to be at the expense of disrupting a starting lineup, which over a large sample size now in terms of the possession game has been really good. And the bench unit has also been very good. So I just don't think that they're going to I don't think they need to mess with what's working for them right now in terms of a starting unit and a bench unit, but they do need Grimes to be more aggressive, to be more assertive, and just to be a little more effective on offense when he has the opportunity, which doesn't come that often, which it's a hard role to play, but this is just the role they need him to play. And this is a team that has their sights set on winning a playoff round or two. They need guys to sacrifice, and Grimes has probably sacrificed more than any player in the Knicks lineup in terms of like his ability, his talent, and what the Knicks are asked of him to do.
If you were to name one thing, like the lowest hanging fruit for him to change in order to get him going more, what do you think it would be?
I think the biggest thing that he can fix right now, because there are certain things like his ball handling ability is for a 2-guard is weak. It just is. Yeah. And it's something that he's going to have to like figure out as he progresses as an NBA player.
It's crazy to know he played point guard at any point.
I know. I'd coming out of when he was recruited out of Kansas, he was a point guard, combo guard, and that was like his MO. And credit to him for changing that idea. But you're right. It's like, And it's one of those things where like, is it a skill that's atrophied because the Knicks have not asked him to do that? So you wonder if he came in on another team and they were, from the start, empowered him to make plays with the ball, like, what would his like ball handling and playmaking skills be on a different roster? Which I think is a valid, not necessarily critique, but something to sort of consider. Like, all right, his ball handling has gotten worse since like his high school days, theoretically. But is that just because he hasn't been asked to do those things, and do your skills atrophy when you're not using them in game action? But just be more assertive. I mean, that's what he needs to be. He needs to just make quick decisions. And him and Josh Hart have a similar issue of like catching the ball and not necessarily attacking right away, whether it's with the shot, whether it's just attacking that closeout right away, or just keeping the ball moving. The Knicks get into trouble where they catch, pump fake, record scratch. What are we going to do? All right, we're going to pass it. And then now there's 10 seconds left on the shot clock. Jalen's got the ball in his hands, or Randall. And it's a tough look that's going to come out of that scenario. So just be more assertive, which is something that he can do, and he can do tomorrow, and just do it right away. But, he's not in a great spot for him as a player in terms of his individual skill, development, talent, production. But the lineup is good partly because of him. Like his defense matters, and I feel like his spacing matters. So he is having, I think, a positive impact, but he does need to be better, and that's just the way it is.
To bring it full circle, you just mentioned the whole record scratch, and then Brunson and Randall had the ball with 10 seconds left. And then it goes to the point of why fans think that the Knicks don't actually run a more complicated offense with horns and pistol action and Spain pick and rolls, because all that'll happen. And then there's 8 seconds left, and for some reason they never got the ball inside or inside outside. And then Randall's backing a guy down with 5 seconds, or Brunson's going ISO with 5 seconds. Right. And it's like, the common guy will ignore the 12 seconds that went into them trying to do stuff prior to getting to that point. DJ, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you.
Sure.
I did say it was tongue in cheek in the email, so if you don't have a real answer, that is a-okay. But even this year, withstanding, including this year, why does it always seem impossible, not impossible, but just really hard for both RJ Barrett and Julius Randle to have it going together at the same time efficiently?
Yeah, well, I think part of that is like the legitimate answer might be like the stuff they do well is not necessarily taking advantage of what the player does well. So when the Knicks run like their pistol action for RJ, Randle is always a spacer on those plays. It's a 3-man action with the center usually setting the screen, and then the guard, usually Jalen or IQ, pitching it to RJ. Then they run their action. Julius is a spacer in that play. And then for Julius, like, he'll get RJ going because he can back down, isolation, or post up and get attention drawn to him, and then he can swing, and RJ can get a look out of that. Because if you look at what RJ does as a shooter, his 3-point percentage and his attempts go up when he's playing with Randle, and that goes back to his rookie season. So Randle does generate 3-point looks for RJ, but in terms of like their way they play off each other, like they don't necessarily like enhance the other person's ability all the time. Like they're not the most like seamless pairing in that way, where I think for Brunson and Randle, they've grown into the fact that they can play off each other a little more. And especially with Jalen spreading, be able to space deeper out now, they really are a good tandem. With RJ and Randle, it's a little different, where RJ gets a lot of his like best actions when Randle is off the floor, when RJ can lead the second unit. So that's probably part of it. And, it's one of those things where like in the playoffs, those guys are playing 35 minutes plus. There's a lot less time for them to sort of get their own when the other person is not on the court. So they do have to figure out how to enhance the other person's abilities. But I will say that Randle does help out RJ in the sense that he can get him open looks. And he's one of the few guys on the Knicks roster that can consistently do that. And RJ is a good catch and shoot player from the corner. So something to keep in mind. But generally speaking, I feel like your perception of them never being like elite at the same time is absolutely true. And I don't know if I have like the best answer for it, but it's something that feels like it's happening.
It just seems like, I mean, they've been playing together for what, 4 years now, going on the 5th year. So it's just, you would imagine at this point they would have not counteracted each other as much as they do. But one thing they both lack a little bit, neither one of them are above average 3-point shooters. So if one of them, like you said, Randle a lot of the times is being the spacer when RJ is getting the pistol action. The spacer gives you less space when he shoots 34% from 3 versus 39% from 3. And it is what it is.
And he's not even at 34% this year. So he needs to get, if he can shoot 34% by the end of the year, I feel like he's going to have a decent finish, because it's rough right now as a shooter for Julius. Need to get that up.
100%. DJ, thank you again. Real quick, if you want to plug anything you're doing, I know you do a lot of work for Knicks Film School, so plug away.
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at DJ Ace NBA. All my stuff's on there. Knicks Film School stuff will be on my feed as well, so I'm always sharing stuff from them. I appreciate you, Joe, having me on. I feel like you guys are doing great work. I love the community as a whole, and in terms of Knicks Twitter or Knicks X, whatever we're calling it these days. But it's been fun to see you guys grow and the whole community itself continue to grow. And there's plenty of space for us all, and it's fun to see how much appetite there is for Knicks content, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And it's been fun to see it kind of flourish before my eyes, being on this platform for a while. So thank you for having me. And just, anytime you want to do this again, just give me a shout.
Much appreciated. Will do. And I saw you tweet yesterday after the newest Elon Musk go after yourself, he said on TV or whatever it was. Yeah. Threads needs more people, man. NBA Threads is a thriving, growing community, and it's all right. Positivity still. There is no negative Knicks threads. There's no negative threads anything for the NBA so far. So if you want to come on over.
I have an account. I haven't used it, but I'll have to take up on that for sure.
It'd be worthwhile. And then again, for the merchandise, we're offering free shipping until December 11th. The code is Xmas23. December 11th is also the last day to guarantee your merch will get there from BigNickEnergy.com before Christmas Day. BigNickEnergy.com, Xmas23. Get your free shipping and get your merch today. And let's go Knicks. This has been the newest episode of the Big Nick Energy podcast. When you listen to this, we'll have already beaten the Pistons for the 89th time in a row. Let's go Knicks. Peace.